Fred here has been really excited about learning how to run a little bit better. They've got a fun run at Thanksgiving coming up, and they'd really like to be able to work off all that extra turkey that they ate. We've talked about this with walking, and with so many natural, instinctive things, we can tend to do it a little bit not perfect. And for many people, that's no big deal. But for a lot of people, especially patients that I see who come in with a lot of foot, ankle, knee, hip, back, even shoulder pain, can be related to how we walk and run. And so I'd just like to leave you guys with a couple thoughts about how you might imagine moving your body to make running feel a little bit better, more graceful, and less painful over time. In my walking video, I talked about how to use your spine as a spring to store and release energy to get you moving. So if we're just kind of starting from a neutral position, we take a half step back, we turn towards our front leg to store some energy in our spine. I've got ears over shoulders over hips. My core is gently engaged. My glutes are gently engaged. My feet are pointing pretty straight forward. And I'm going to rise up onto my feet. I'm going to use my arms to help me rise up onto my feet. And I'm going to release that energy in my spine twist to step forward with a very gentle foot. And now my spine is reloaded on the other side. So arms help us rise up onto our toes. And we twist the spine and land gently on the other side. As we start doing this faster and faster, walking becomes a little bit like a jump forward. And that's what running is. When I first started to run, I used really thick running shoes and I had a really bad heel strike. When we hit the ground with our heel, that sends a shock wave up through a rigid bar right into the lower back. And I had a lot of back pain, and I developed a bunion from wearing shoes that are too tight in the toe box. And if you look at people who run barefoot, they tend to land with the front or the ball of their foot loaded like a spring right underneath their hips. So now I've got a shock absorber taking the energy of my stride and not putting on the brakes with a heel strike. And then when we load up that spring, that allows us to then launch into the next stride a little bit more naturally or a little bit more powerfully. We start with that slightly twisted spine. We're going to use our arms to help us propel on to the balls of our feet as my spine starts to unload that twisted energy. And what I want you to think about is driving that knee forward as if you were going to do a long jump. And as you do that long jump, I want you to think about gently reaching out with those toes to meet the ground ever so gently. I think ninja feet. So I'm loaded up. My arms help me lift onto my toes. I drive my knee forward and I land with a loaded spring right underneath my hips. When we're doing our running stride, the rhythm I'd like you to keep in mind is less stride, 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 but more like bounce and snap, bounce and snap, bounce and snap, where there's a whew, whew. The velocity is not the same through all points in the cycle. There's a speed and a reload, a speed and a reload. And so if you can keep the speed and reload rhythm rather than the cycle, 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 with a little bit of a bounce and a knee drive, you'll notice that you're less stampy and you're not losing velocity with your runs. I like to think of my hands as kind of gently swimming through waist-deep water. So if I kind of keep my hands right at my belly button, as I'm running, I'm pulling myself forward. Notice I'm grabbing some air and I'm pulling it into my hips as I'm driving my hips forward. Your arms aren't stiff pendulums. They're really helping to maintain balance and momentum, and I've found that by gently swimming with my hands, then it makes it a little bit easier to load up my torso for the twisting spring. And it keeps my hands relaxed so I'm not squeezing my fists and losing energy there. That I'd like you to keep in mind is, what is the angle of your pelvis? So we can have a pretty neutral pelvis. We can have an anterior pelvic tilt. If you look at my lower back, an anterior pelvic tilt is where the front of my pelvis is tilted down and the back of my pelvis is tilted up, and it looks like I've got a big arch here. And it looks like I'm kind of sticking my behind out. If we do a little bit more of an posterior pelvic tilt, I'm kind of gently squeezing with my core to pull my pelvis more flat when I run. Then my core is better able to absorb the impact from the run. If I'm here, then this is not a very efficient structure to absorb all the impact from our running. So think about tilting your pelvis forward, and that makes it easier to drive your center of mass forward as well. As we're learning to kind of run from scratch again, I recommend going super duper slow. Find a spot with some soft ground, like a park where there's grass. And it almost is going to feel painfully slow, but I want you to feel the bounce, and I want you to feel the smoothness before we work on speed. There's a wonderful metaphor when people are practicing martial arts and music. Fast ends up being slow, but slow is smooth and smooth is fast. So start with baby steps, feel the bounce, feel the rhythm, feel the glide, and then as that feels more and more natural, then you can pick up the speed. For example, you might do 10 to 20 strides of fast and then slow down, reset, and then get your stride back, and when it feels good, do 10 to 20 strides of fast again, and repeat that until you can keep up the stride without losing your form. Best of luck. Work off those calories, buddy.